So I have the choice of plant, and obviously that is what I would want to drag out there. So the answer is still there, etc. In this case, I have mushrooms and sun. Which of these two things is not alive? Piggy bank or plant? So I've asked three questions, but I've also provided both the positive and the negative aspect of those questions. Import the question image here, put that onto the page. Again, I would create that looking at whatever size I would want. Since this is not a background image, it does not require to take up the entire screen. Let's move on to the next activity, hotspots. The hotspots activity is a way for me to be able to use images and have the students actually have to identify different locations on the images. I need to create the activities. I've got two of them here, HS1 and HS2. And I would then set my background image. The background image would of course be 1024 by 768. It would take up the entire screen. And then I can add in labels or pictures to drag and drop as appropriate onto the image. Notice that I'm showing the end position here. So if I wanted to add in a new label for, let's say, this leopard's tail, I would click on Add Label. And down here at the bottom, it gives me label 6. By double clicking on that, it's going to allow me to highlight, and I'm going to type in the word tail. And then I would just drag the tail to where I would want the answer to be. When the question actually pops up, all of these labels will be available around the perimeter of the screen, and there will be a spot where each one of these should go. And the task then is for the student to take the label and drag it to the spot that they feel it is appropriate, and that is how it would be scored. If I look at HS2, so here I have the name as well as whether it is alive or not. Piggy bank, not alive. Bag, not alive. Hay, not alive. Plant, alive. Balloon, not alive. Fly, alive. So in this case, I was able to add in multiple pictures, and then I added in labels on top of the pictures. I'm going to go ahead and skip over the addition activity for a second and go to Addition Plus. Addition Plus, this allows me to use multiple different ways of counting, and I can actually program in what the correct answer should be. So how many of these are living things? Again, my background image, 1024 by 768. I've used this image over and over. The answer is 8, so I actually key in what the correct answer is, and then I get to figure out, do I want them to use counting blocks, US coins, Canadian coins, UK, or euros. So I'm going to stick with blocks. Since I'm not actually doing a math equation using currency, I'm just going to have them count with blocks. Here's another question. Slightly different image. How many of these things are not living? And the answer is 9. And again, using the counting blocks. The final activity in this content pack is hot spaces. Hot spaces, this is where I would come in and I would load in a background image. And then I can actually drag a box and identify that as an area. So the important thing to realize here is that if I wanted to, I would need to, on my background, actually write in or type in on the background that this would be a noun. And then, of course, I would want to do it upside down as well, which is as simple as, creating and then cloning and flipping it in whatever Photoshop or whatever image application you want. But again, that way no student has to read anything upside down. Without that, these boxes, the students have no idea where they're supposed to drag what. But I can add labels, I can add pictures, and then I'm showing the end region. So by leaving it here, that's telling the system that this box is the correct answer for caterpillar. But again, without a word in there, it makes it very difficult to know where it is I'm dragging it. If I move all of these out, you will see that I have never alive. And then if I move all of these out up here, you will see that I have the word alive. So that's how I've identified where I would like to drop these. Note that this cannot be done inside the toolkit. It would need to be done in your image creation software at the point of creating your background picture. The last activity is the addition activity. The addition activity allows me, once again, to count with coins, Canadian, US, Euros, UK, counting blocks, or also to count by fingers. But the important thing to understand about this activity is that there's very little customizability. It is purely random, and that's why we have chosen to go with the Addition Plus, where I can actually dictate what the correct answer is versus letting the computer come up with it on their own. Counting by fingers, there's no manipulatives. The students actually have to place down the correct number of fingers on the display at the same time for it to recognize the answer. So once again, my Home tab, this is for setting the background as well as the first entry screen for this content pack. The Paint application, I can have multiple background images here that the students are able to paint on, to circle on, to use as discussion. Media, I've got video clips as well as still pictures, my zoom capability, the scaling, multiple choice, creating my activities and putting in my questions. Hotspots, identifying locations on images that I would like labels to be dropped on. Addition Plus, which is where I get to dictate the answer. Hot Spaces is similar to Hotspots, except it's dragging images and labels into containers as opposed to a specific spot. And finally, I have my online activities, where I can go online to Smart's website and download any of these activity packs for use with the Smart Table. At this point, I'd like to say thank you. Again, my name is Christopher Klein, and this is the Smart Table Toolkit.